Footage showing a procession of Russian T-54 and T-55 tanks being transported via rail from the Far Eastern Primorsky Krai region in March 2023 has sparked widespread conjecture about their potential deployment to the Ukrainian front at the time. This region is home to the 1,295th Central Tank Reserve and Storage Base, where a significant number of Soviet-era armored vehicles are stored. This development follows the recent removal of T-62 tanks from reserve storage, with substantial quantities of this model having been deployed to Ukraine. As they are built for war, how viable and dangerous could the T-54 or 55 tanks be in combat in Ukraine? The T-54 or 55 stands a notable distinction of being the tank with the highest production volume in history. Approximately 100,000 units were manufactured spanning the years from 1946 to 1981. In contrast, the most extensively produced American tank, the M4 Sherman, accounts for less than half that figure, with a total of 49,234 units constructed. Upon its introduction, the T-54 or 55 held a substantial lead of over a decade compared to foreign tank designs. Western experts who examined the first T-54 or 55 in 1956 found it to be not only 10 tons lighter than NATO's top tank at the time, the American M48A2, but also better equipped in terms of weaponry and armor. However, by the 1980s, the T-54 or 55 was deemed outdated for armored confrontations due in part to its lack of a smoothbore gun, a technology not seen elsewhere at the time, which is a pioneering feature of the T-62 models, as well as its armor protection and sensor technology falling significantly behind modern standards. The T-54 or 55, however, succeeded the brief existence of the T-44 and carried on the legacy of the renowned T-34 from World War II. It even marked the initial post-war Soviet main battle tank, developed to counter adversaries in NATO like the M48 Patton. They exhibited improved mechanical capabilities, particularly in its torsion bar suspension and transmission, and boasted a maximum armor protection of 203 millimeters. The initial turret design had a tendency to direct rounds downwards into the turret ring, prompting its replacement with a more rounded frying pan shape featuring an internal mantlet. In terms of armament, the machine guns employed were the Degtyaryov DP-28, using the same 7.62 by 54 mmER cartridge as the famed Mosin-Nagant infantry and sniper rifle. The recent iterations, Al-Kafil-1 and Al-Zarar, showcase upgraded attributes like smoothbore guns, contemporary fire control systems, and armored shielding. The latter model even incorporates a larger 125 millimeters gun, rendering them more capable than many of the frontline Russian tank variants, including various T-72 and T-80 models. While the T-55 design holds the potential for substantial enhancements, those originating from the 1950s and 1960s in the Soviet Union encounter limitations due to aging components and outdated base armor. The most ambitious modernization package pursued for the T-55 design in Russia was the T-55 MV-1, developed during the 1980s for the Soviet naval infantry. This upgrade encompassed the incorporation of Contact 1 explosive reactive armor, access to novel guided munitions, and integration of new engines and fire control systems. The T-54 is usually categorized with the T-55 series. The T-54 was classified as a medium tank, whereas the T-55 was designated as a main battle tank. They maintained a relatively light weight for a main battle tank, around 36 tons, and could reach a top speed of 31.6 miles per hour. Despite its outdated design and retirement from Russian service, the T-54 or 55 continues to maintain its status as one of the most vicious tanks employed globally. This is proven in the theater of the Hungarian Revolution. Perhaps no other military equipment conveyed the stark depiction of the harshness of the Soviet invasion and occupation of Hungary as effectively as the T-54 or 55 tanks did. At that time, some of these tanks were destroyed using Molotov cocktails. Unfortunately, the fighters' attempts to combat these potent tanks were unsuccessful because they lacked their own armored vehicles and because NATO did not provide them with air support. If T-54 or 55 tanks were designated for deployment in Ukraine, there exists the potential for them to undergo upgrades based on the model established for the naval infantry in the 1980s. The T-54 or 55 tanks are valued for their minimal logistical requirements and ease of maintenance, qualities that stand out even when compared to the T-62, let alone the more modern T-72 and T-90. This aspect could enable the Russian military and affiliated groups to field a substantially larger armored force by relying on these vehicles. In fact, the T-55, which has been strengthened with the more modern M55 model from Slovenia, has been prominently used by the Ukrainian army. Its acquisition was considerably aided by equipment transfers from Germany. According to some sources, Ukraine is about to acquire around 100 German Leopard 1 tanks, an outdated model that also does not have a smoothbore cannon. The T-54 or 55 tanks could also likely benefit from the incorporation of thermal sights, enhancing their situational awareness. If these tanks were granted access to fragmentation projectiles, akin to those utilized by T-62s and more contemporary vehicles, they could potentially make a substantial contribution to infantry support operations, a pivotal role for tanks on all sides throughout the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. It is worth noting that Western tanks notably lack access to such projectiles, implying that these modifications might render the T-54 or 55 tanks particularly valuable to the Ukrainian army, primarily for anti-armor tasks. Although the T-54 or 55 have extensive advantages, they also faced various issues. For instance, they had limited space inside and an uncomfortable design. This not only made the crew's experience uncomfortable, but also made their operations slower. The small turret also made it hard to lower the main gun by more than 5 degrees, and the tanks lacked protection for their internal ammunition. However, these do not diminish the T-54 or 55 effectiveness for deployment in Ukraine, given that they are purposely built for warfare. Thanks for watching.